The sky was filled with gray colors and intense fog. Stormy clouds loomed on the horizon, and visibility was minimal. To make matters worse, the rain started dropping and flurries began to blend in with it. The four-man crew of Project Gemini made its way from Ellington Air Force Base, Texas, to its destination at Lambert Field in St. Louis, Missouri. The weather was not expected to change throughout the day. and Bassett were flying in one Northrop T-38A Talon jet trainer. Stafford and Cernan, the backup crew, in another one that followed Storm. The crew pulled away as they approached the landing zone at Lambert Field. Do so, as the weather began to deteriorate quickly. The pilots were too far down the runway to safely land. Stafford and Cernan opted for a missed approach procedure and climbed straight ahead approach. C and Bass landing attempt on their first pass. They sustained their left turn aircraft towards McDonnell Building 101, and the fatal accident occurred. Realizing their sink rate was too high, they turned on the afterburners and tried to perform a sharp right turn. The B-8 jet hit the roof of the McDonnell Building and crashed into a courtyard nearby. The loss of the two young Americans was a tragedy, changed American space history forever. If they had made the maneuver just in the instant, they could have brought down the entire building and all the Project Gemini. It would have buried the American space. The end of World War II gave way to decade advancements. When the Allies took over Germany, they discovered astonishing technology programs and studies German scientists had done for the Reich. Many of those top-secret projects in Soviet hands. World War II was an age of violence, espionage, and most importantly, technological innovation. Mankind's dream was only possible to Americans and Soviets, the victors of the economic powers. Supersonic fighters, helicopters, colossal war, and many other innovations were developed back-to-back with aircraft capable of in the stars. During the arms race, the US and the USSR were also eager to take this man to the moon. In the early 19th, the USSR had the upper edge thanks to the Sputnik program's successful satellite launches. In 1961, to global recognition, when Yuri Gagarin became the first human to venture into outer aboard the Vostok 1 capsule of Earth on April 12, 1961. It seemed that the US could simply not keep up with Russia. Project Vanguard, SCORE, and the launch of the Explorer passed unadvertised and were deemed a failure by many experts. Committed to winning space, the US created the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in 1958 and destined a significant amount of money to the space program. To truly demonstrate American superiority, the government named Project A119, which had the objective of bomb on the moon. Eventually cancelled, because the government concluded that landing a man on the moon would attract more global attention in a more amicable way. Mercury was the direct consequence of Russia's successful Sputnik program. To recover American morale, the government created the first U.S. human. It ran from 1958 to 1963. After Yuri Gagarin, the U.S. launched its first astronaut, Alan Shepard, flight on May 5, 1961. Months later, on February 20th, 1962, when John Glenn made 3 orbits around the Earth. Project Gemini was the follow-up of Project Mercury. It was born in 1961 and ended in 1966. The program's objective was to develop necessary for NASA's most ambitious dream, the Apollo mission, so as landing a man on the moon. The project received support from President John F. Kennedy, American on the moon before the USSR. Nonetheless, with the worldwide hysteria reaching a breaking point during 1962, and the assassination of JFK the year that followed, the space race momentarily faded from the public perspective with the approaching Vietnam War. In November 1965, The Gemini 9 crew was integrated Charles Bassett. Their backups were Tom Stafford. Their mission was scheduled for May 1966. Gemini had a 3-day mission that would demonstrate rendezvous and docking within the Gina target. The mission would end with Bassett himself, or a spacewalk, using an astronaut maneuvering unit as AMU. Trained hard to get physically fit for their mission. Cernan would later write, "Before long we grew Popeye-sized forearms." Elliot See and Charles Bassett were considered novice or rookie because they had no previous NASA mission experiences. However, that did not mean they weren't qualified. See was a former General Electric pilot, for aircraft, and decided to pursue his aviation and engineering career. In the Navy, he acquired the rank of lieutenant commander when he left naval. Bassett belonged to. He enrolled in the Reserve Officers Training Corps as an aviation and graduated in 1953 with an 8th Fighter Bomber Group and tested every USAF aircraft at his. He was selected for astronaut training and the crew of 4 was hoping it would lead the U.S. one step closer to landing on the moon. On February 28, 1966, the project was almost jeopardized for one sudden and lamentable accident. On that February day in 1966, severe weather conditions that included heavy rain, fog, a pair of slim Northrop T-38A jet trainers took off in Houston, Texas. And were in the lead aircraft, followed closely by Stafford and Cernan. Their destination was McDonnell Aircraft in St. Louis, Missouri, and for 2 weeks in rendezvous and docking procedures. When the Gemini crew approached the landing zone, control tower, and was told that visibility had dropped to just 2.4 kilometers. As the two overcast, the crew realized they were too far down the runway to land. Stafford decided to take another approach, while See chose to keep the and he circled to the left to land on his first pass. As See and Bassett's airplane vanished from sight, Stafford barked, quote, "Where's he going?" The rain was heavy, was gray, and they never saw See or Bassett again. Just seconds later, they would crash. For a moment, Stafford and waiting for the Lambert Field air controllers to answer them and clear them for landing. But no response came from the control tower. Abruptly, strange question, quote, "Who was in NASA 901? Puzzled, he answered, quote, he was then cleared. When he and Cernan opened the canopy after James McDonnell himself, the founder of McDonnell Aircraft Corp. After a formal salute, McDonnell told them, quote, "They're dead." He explained to them that See and Bassett, Stafford and their fellow friends had crashed attempting to. Although the loss of the two brilliant men, things could have gone worse. Much worse. If season had been a little lower when it hit Building 101 of McDonnell, it was the assembly line, destroying the Gemini 9 and Gemini 10 aircraft and killing hundreds of McDonnell spacecraft construction workers. Tom Stafford, in his book We Have Capture, wrote, quote, 100 feet earlier, it would have hit the side and roof of the building, into the roof, and wiped out the whole Gemini program. If that had happened, Project Gemini would have been over, and the American chance of one day reaching the lunar surface would have seen. Instead, only debris, with no casualties, and no permanent infrastructure. On March 4th, crew and astronaut corps gathered at Arlington National Cemetery to watch as Elliot and Captain Charles Arthur Bassett of the USAF were laid to rest. The committee, led by Chief Astronaut Alan Shepard, concluded had no mechanical problems, and that See and Bassett were in optimal physical. Their instrument flying certificates within the last 6 months. Both men were in There was no problem with them at all. Although the terrible weather was a contributor, the board concluded that pilot error was the biggest mistake that led to the crash. The committee indicated that C's attempt of not losing too slowly. The incident had more significant consequences than could be anticipated. Gemini 9's new backup pilot, and he eventually flew Gemini 12 in Nox. If not for Aldrin would certainly not have been the lunar module pilot of Apollo 11, second man to walk on the moon alongside Armstrong in 1969. Vernon moved on and made history after the crash. Final dress rehearsal for the first lunar landing, and on the moon.